Well, we return for another episode 11. We're still chugging along here. The guns are still pressed to our temples.
Solid seventh grade. Seventh. My 11th episode of my life was one of my least favorite, but it was when I met Tyler. So who's to say how bad it really was?
God, were we really 11?
11 or 12. It was seventh grade. So
Jesus. That's insane.
I know.
Wow, I'm having like a moment. But I was having a moment over the weekend. It
Mm.
was it's been a busy few weeks, but on Sunday night we had the Oscars, which was kind
The
of
Super
atrocious by all
Bowl of the
accounts.
movies. You
It's
know.
Christmas in Tinseltown, as
Mm.
the great Tim Heidecker would say. Um, I mean, you really had it all. You had Jimmy Kimmel asking Malala if what was it, Harry Styles spit on Chris Pine or something.
I think the
So
important part was that they had Malala. I'm not going to butcher her last name, but the winner of a Nobel Peace Prize for resisting the oppression of women. They had her being like
literally
attacked
shot by the Taliban.
um for women's rights. They had her attacked by a man in a cocaine bear costume during Women's History Month, and it's really all you need to. In a way, it was Women's History, but not the type we remember fondly.
Oh, I think it really sums up how Hollywood views the world. Um, they just view it through their own little lens.
All the world's a stage, and we are but its merry players. No matter what we've actually accomplished in life.
Yeah, I was also really upset that it didn't even look like Lydia Tarr was invited to the Oscars. I thought I saw her, but turns out that was just Kate Blanchett. I didn't
Listen,
see Tar anywhere. Where was she?
the
She did a
tar
great job in
heads,
that documentary.
the tar heads, the tar heels. Tar Nation was in shambles, myself included, on Sunday night.
The tar industry stocks were going down.
It was kind of
You
like
should have
La
been watching
Brea.
that.
It should have been like La Brea, in that Hollywood should have been sinking into the tar. But much like how they treat our environment, they're running from the tar. Yeah, I mean, listen, I liked Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I wasn't mad that Michelle Yeoh won. I was a little more mad that Tar didn't win Best Director, personally. But yeah, I mean, it's fucked up. Lydia wasn't there. I really wanted to see how she, make her big return from
I
cancellation.
know. Yeah, maybe next Christmas in Tinseltown we'll get it. Um, bits aside, I was happy to see everything everywhere all at once kind of do a big sweep. I was kind of surprised about Jamie Lee Curtis. Like, I think she's good in that movie, but
It's
like
the Lifetime
Oscar
Achievement
worthy.
Award.
Yeah, that's kind of what it felt like. Where they really kind of bought into the stories of a lot of these actors, which don't get me wrong, are great stories. Like
It's
you
better
really
than
do love to
fucking
see a lot of
last
these.
year. You know?
Yeah, fucking Coda is one of the worst Best Picture,
Did anyone
maybe
even
the
watch
worst
Coda?
Best. I did, and it's imagine like an ABC Family movie. Like that's Coda.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing as
It's
like
bad.
The same thing as like Leo winning for The Revenant. Like, not even close to his best
Hmm.
Oscar nominated role, but they're like, ah, fuck, here you go. So they're always playing
Yeah,
catch up to some extent.
we'll give it to him. We'll
Was
give
it
it to him.
same reason why like Austin Butler probably deserved it, but they had to give the Brendan Fraser like, we're sorry for letting a Hollywood producer rape you and then like ruining your career. So have this
Yeah,
award
I think that was retroactively awarded for Looney Tunes Back in Action.
for Encino
That's
Man.
yeah. But most certainly Looney Tunes. I feel like Austin Butler wasn't even like aware that he was there. I feel like playing Elvis really did a number on this man, for better or for worse. So
Yeah, I mean, he's still kind of doing the accent. Like, he can't really escape it.
yeah, he hasn't really been able to stop, and I think it's
I
kind
think
of
that's
funny
beautiful. I think it's beautiful. Like
because
everyone's
he's
like, "Oh,
also
we love
yeah.
method actors," but what happens when their method's simply too strong?
What if
You know?
they literally become them for the rest of their lives? It's taking acting to a whole new level, but yeah, the comedy, I I think the Oscars next year, no jokes, just present. No more fucking banter.
No,
It's not
I think
funny.
next year it should just be kind of like celebrity death match, but like celebrity slap match. Like they should bring that new slap league to the Oscars, and it's just like various celebrities. So it's like it's like let's do Ellen versus Kate Blanchett. Round
Yeah.
one. Let's just see how it goes.
Or they call them the big dogs. Us. We get on stage and we're hosting the Oscars. So Academy, we're two somewhat good looking guys, you know. If I do say so
I
myself.
will get on Ozempic. I will get the filler. I will get the Kardashian face surgery. Just let me
I will
on
do
TV.
anything you want me to do to get on there. And I think we just take the Oscars hostage. We filibuster that shit and we do a live pod at the Oscars. So you're here to hear first, folks. It's coming.
Well, I want to quickly segue to another. Well, in a way, it's kind of Oscars related in that, we already have fertile ground for the Tar sequel, Tar 2, Retribution. They say that life imitates art, and I can think of no better example. So the headline of this is from the New York Times. He smeared feces on a critic and lost the job. Now he wants to be heard. The opening line is
We're here to amplify voices, of course.
on Saturday night in Hanover's main opera house. Marco, I'm not going to say his name. It's Tar 2. On Saturday night in Hanover's main opera house.
The new Tar.
Tar 2, a renowned German choreographer, smeared dog feces from his aging Dachshund Gustav on the face of a dance critic.
Damn. That'll show him.
I mean, as someone who is a critic kind of on this, I've started to wear a Scream mask, a Ghostface mask everywhere, just to make sure if I do get shit smeared, it won't look that bad. It won't like fuck up my skin or anything. But yeah, they've declared war on critics in ballet.
It's happening.
So you will not catch me.
I mean, it's a good thing that like we've kind of stopped caring about ballet.
Maybe
I
we
think
should
that's,
care because this should be like the biggest story in the arts world, honestly.
Oh, actually, I just hold on. As my brain was thinking, you know who else recently said some stuff about critics? The Rock. Dwayne Johnson was like, the words of the critics about my shitty movie Black Adam, they hurt a little bit. They hurt. Now, people rubbing feces on my face, that I can handle. That's like a regular Wednesday for me. But Dwayne Johnson trying to come for me, now that makes me a little scared.
What if The Rock? Yeah, I mean, what's worse? Dog shit in the mouth or The Rock calling you a jabroni after asking what's your name?
One cuts deeper than the other.
I just want to say one more thing about this before we totally lose the plot. So he's getting fired from the opera house, but they're still performing his pieces. The head of the opera house said, quote, "I do not believe in cancel culture." So, is smearing dog shit in a critic's face worthy of cancellation, Tyler?
No. Don't think so.
There you go. Cancel culture has gone the perfect amount. And welcome back to We Demand Podcast. I'm Danny.
I'm Tyler.
We're two old friends who have different tastes in music. And once a month, we kind of get together in sort of like an old ladies playing bridge club. But instead of playing bridge, we play music for each other. And then talk shit about how bad they played the game afterwards. Tyler, how are you?
Yeah, it's like a shitty version of March Madness, but I'm doing pretty good. I'm ready to discuss some tunes and get into some deep questions about life and what we're doing on this crazy bitch of an earth. Danny, I want you to look outside your window and tell me what space object do you currently see in the sky?
Uh, Nothing
I'll
because
give
I
you a
just see the
hint.
light.
It helps control the tides of the Earth's oceans.
The Cobra space station that GI Joe is currently trying to take down.
Exactly right. So we're gonna be covering television's classic Cobra Space Station. This, um, no, but in all seriousness, folks, the jokes are done. There's no more jokes the rest of the podcast. This is a serious podcast
I
starting
am
now.
putting on my
Yeah,
Kojanambi voice for the rest of
we're
this.
we're going ASMR mode. I'm fully naked. I think Danny's getting there,
Oh,
but
brother, I've been naked. I'm naked every episode. I'm naked except for like I take a banana peel and like super glue it back together and just wear that on my dick. But otherwise,
oh my god. Okay. Well, uh, I gotta get back on track.
the
Okay,
fucking no jokes lasted all of like 5 seconds.
I don't even think it
Anyway.
lasted that long. Um, but getting the ship back on course, I gave Danny television's 1977 classic Marquee Moon. For me, this is truly an iconic and I'd say pretty timeless album. Its influence is still very, very prevalent today. Before you can talk about Indian alternative rock music that's being made now, you do have to go back and talk about Marquee Moon, which is kind of partly why I picked it. If I had to make a list of my favorite albums of all time, I'm not really sure this cracks the list, but it's kind of the bedrock for so much music to come after that really clicks with me. And I knew we were going to discuss this at some point,
Hmm.
but the lead singer and guitarist Tom Verlaine passed away in late January, so it felt like it was an appropriate time to talk about it. A lot of people were obviously pouring out with the tributes. I was listening to the album, I think the day of or maybe the day after he had passed away, so just get in that mindset. I was like, I think we'd have a lot of good conversations coming out of this. So I'll toss it over to you. What did you think?
Um. Hmm. I think we're already gonna have an interesting conversation. I would say I thought it was a very of its time.
Hmm.
This is in. I just want to say this is interesting in that very. I try to avoid doing research on albums you give me as much as possible, and I did a fair amount of research on this because I don't know if it
We're in the
ever quite.
library late at night.
I was like Woodward and Bernstein, but I was reading all music in Wikipedia and old Village Voice articles. Um,
Perfect.
yeah, I think that I liked it, but I struggle to understand why. Well, that's not true. I understand why it's a classic. For me, it felt like more influential than it was enjoyable for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Mm-hmm.
I experienced this a lot with movies where like I'm not a big movie guy, but I grew up watching a decent number of movies. So sometimes you'll go back and watch like a classic lauded movie from like this era, like mid to late 70s. And you're like that was good, but I've seen this done so many times since then
Yeah,
and maybe in ways
it's
that
kind of been
resonate more.
improved upon.
Yeah. Um I want to say the one thing I didn't have to look up was that this band was from New York. Like I, I think 15 seconds into See No Evil, which is the opening track, I was like, this is fucking 1977 New York incarnate.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I mean, just going off of that, like, I guess the biggest thing is I see how this was very influential on particularly like alternative rock of the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think
Absolutely.
I just prefer alt rock of the 80s to this.
Yeah, and I think you kind of captured a lot of my sentiments on this album. I enjoy it, but I think I enjoy its influence more than the album itself. Just in the sense of like my favorite moments are those parts that remind me of stuff to come out in the 80s, 90s, and then of course you have like post-punk revival era.
Hmm.
But like you said, you listen to the very start of this record and it definitely takes you back to '70s New York rock scene. Television played a lot at CBGB, and Tom Berlane actually got the owner there to like play other bands on stage. So that's also the club where Talking Heads, Blondie, they got their start. So they're kind of all from that same scene, but I definitely think Television are synonymous with New York rock music, and just kind of they're integral to the city's music history. And without Television and Marquee Moon, you're not going to have REM. You're not going to have Joy Division, LCD Sound System, definitely no Interpol, and like certainly you're not going to have the Strokes. Um, so it really feels like this landmark moment in alternative indie rock. And when I was thinking about my pick for you for March, obviously we've done a lot of albums that I think we have very strong personal ties to, which yield very fun personal discussions. But I kind of wanted to pick something that, even myself, I'm not like in love with this album as the other ones I've given you. Like if I had to rank all of my choices that I've given you since we've started in terms of like my amount of love, this one is lower on the list. Like I don't even own this album. I think all the other ones I've given you, I I'm pretty sure I own. I'd have to like go through the whole list, but I'm like fairly certain. Maybe you made me realize I don't technically have like on vinyl or anything. Um, but I just kind of wanted to take it all back and sort of pinpoint like this influential starting period, especially given that last time you listened to Sonic Youth and everything, another New York band. But I guess, getting into the conversation, were there any standout tracks for you? Any of your favorites?
Yeah, the two that really stood out to me were See No Evil and Torn Curtain. For like two very different reasons. Like when I think of this band, I see them as sort of like a middle, like they come at this key moment, and I kind of heard this in the music, but it's very much like verified by the research. Like in between sort of like New York punk and new wave and college
Yeah.
rock, and they really embody that transition. So on, See No Evil to me is the punkiest one. It's like the rawest energy. It really reminded me of like 70s Kinks in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. And then Torn Curtain to me is where all of the more ambitious post-punk, I guess new wave, no wave ideas are like fully realized in a way I think that truly worked for me. And like I said, that's the opening track and the closing track. And if it wasn't for the singer, you could almost confuse them for two different bands, which I think is impressive. And I tend to like albums like that show a range. I also liked Marquee Moon. But I think the two things that held me back from really liking this record, or like loving it, I guess, because I did like it, were
Yeah.
I think very much emblematic of the title track, which are these songs are so self-indulgent. They really need to get off the cocaine and get someone to like tell them to edit their shit a little bit. Like
Hey,
a
cut
lot
it
of these
down.
songs, a lot of these songs could have been like anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds shorter. And then the
Yeah.
mixing. So this is something I want to talk about just to get your take on. At the time, like you can like the coverage at the time, which loved this record, like particularly the New York press at the Village Voice, like everyone was this, they were all like, this is the craziest shit I've ever heard. Like this is going to change the entire game. Like it was very much hail. Like its influence was immediate, I guess, or its impact was immediate, which I think is interesting. But a lot of people, including U2's The Edge, really liked the mixing on this because they specifically spurned compressing it a lot to take away a lot of the more rhythmic nature of it and give it, I believe the term used was angular listening. And I do think that kind of holds it back for me personally. Like I think what really works for me about bands like REM or Midnight Oil or it's not The Replacements. It's one of those other college rock bands is that there is like a bounce and a groove. And I think you get that at times, but like as a whole, like the bottom end is pretty washed out. And but I also think it's interesting. I want to get your take on it because like maybe that's just not me being a super big like rock guy in the same way. Like even my favorite 70s rock is very kind of like thumpy and has a strong
Yeah,
groove, and this is definitely guitar driven above all else.
right. And I think that's the key to it all is the mixing definitely brings the guitars to the forefront. I mean, I wrote like obviously it's the guitars that are at the forefront and what you're gonna recognize. I think that's really what they wanted to highlight. I feel like sometimes the vocals do kind of get lost in the sauce a bit, kind of drowned out by the guitars in a way that maybe doesn't work as well as it does for something like shoegaze, where you are kind of supposed to be like overwhelmed. Um, and to compare it with like Talking Heads 77, where like Tina Weymouth is absolutely killing it on the bass, I feel like that has like a bit more low end. I mean, again, going back to these bands that are emerging out of the CBGB scene, obviously for me, Talking Heads are like the best one to come out of it
Mm-hmm.
because it's the fucking Talking Heads. Um, but as we said, this is kind of like this new idea in the sense that there's not a lot of people doing stuff like this yet. It's kind of like proto art punk. It feels like this New York punk album, but it doesn't have all like this like crazy energy like a Ramones album would or something,
Right.
but it has more complexity in its melodies and rhythms. It's kind of jazzy, like especially the licks and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, obviously there's some self indulgence. Like as much as I love Marquee Moon, it has like two or three false endings where it's like, oh, you guys are still going. I think at the time you just didn't have that in music like that. Whereas now that's kind of it's been done, so you can definitely see how it was so influential on people like the Edge, especially that I don't think they were really using any like effects. I think it's really just
It
dual
doesn't sound
guitar
like it.
playing. Yeah, like two leads just like really going off.
Like it really sounds like they're just like sorry, they're like getting distortion by just cranking the gain all the way up. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like and again, just owing to its influence, it's like garage rocky in a way.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds a lot like Detroit garage rock of like the late '60s, like MC5
Yeah.
shit. You know?
Yeah. It's this album has hooks for days. I think just about every track, it's going to end up in your head at some point. Maybe not the whole thing, but you're going to like think of a little lick. Um there's definitely several from one track, I think See No Evil has a lot that I'll think of. So it's very accessible while also kind of still being sort of punky. Um so for me, I mean, my favorite tracks are Marquee Moon, See No Evil, and Friction. I really like that like first 4 song run. I think that's the highlight of the album. And then after that, nothing else like quite hits the heights for me. It's still
Hmm.
good. It's like, oh, that was good, but I don't go and listen to this album as much as I do the other picks I've given you. Um because as we said, there's so many other bands that kind of took these similar ideas and just sort of expanded upon them and added their own twists.
I think just well, I also agree. I think the back half is weaker, although I do love Torn Curtain. Um,
Mhm.
it's funny you mentioned Friction because all I can think of when I listen to Friction is "Beds Are Burning" by Midnight Oil. Like
Mm.
it sounds so much like that song for me. I'm fucking singing "Out Where the River Broke" over it. Like it's kind of like if you took
Yeah.
those the same musical ideas and just like made them 1983 instead of 1977, like it is the same
Mhm.
song. Um, I think it's like hard because like REM might be my favorite like rock band of all time. I was probably gonna give you one of those early '80s REM records at some point, and so it's just
Yeah.
like I think what it is like there's so many new sounds and ideas here that maybe they like I said, all the songs are fairly different. They're all like different ideas, like Torn Curtain
Yeah.
has this kind of like almost psychedelic tone with like the weird vocal runs and the piano. Marquee Moon is like the epic fucking like multiple false endings. You have that crazy part with like the weird
Yeah.
like I can only call them like fairy dust arpeggios and the
Mhm.
second to last false ending. And
Yeah.
then I don't know why they did fucking Guiding Light, but they were like, what if we did like our spin on a fucking ballad, like a fucking mid
Yeah.
'70s power ballad. Um, and so like like and maybe it's because it's such a hodgepodge of the bands that came before him, right? Like you can hear, I mean, especially in the guitar tone, you hear that kind of like raw, twangy, almost bluesy, like Lou Reed,
Yeah.
Velvet Underground
Absolutely.
stuff going on. See No Evil especially, but it has that punky energy, but it also has that kind of like New York Dolls, like '70s glam rock shtick going on here
Yeah.
as well. You have this sort of, I don't know if I want to call them arpeggios, but kind of like the kind of plucky like riffs they have, like in Venus. That riff is pretty
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you
I know
know.
exactly what you mean.
And so you have all these things going on, and I don't know if like with the exception of like a few like half, I can't say a few songs if it's half the record, but like it comes together in about half the record in a way that's really interesting. The other half, it's like that was really interesting. You know,
Yeah.
I will say this is also a great record to listen to while I was doing other tasks when I wasn't
Hmm.
hyper fixated on the things that might bother me, like the mixing on like intense listens. But if you're just like
Yeah.
driving or like working, and you're just like, oh man, like shit rips in that way. It's surprisingly easy listening. You know,
Yeah. It doesn't take a lot from you to enjoy it. For me, this is the kind of album that I listen to, and it makes me want to pick up the guitar and play. Because the guitar work is just so much fun to me. I think it's the fact that there's maybe like five power chords on this whole album. I feel like everything is just catchy licks and riffs, and that's a lot of fun. And it has that twang. There's also some of that grit in a way. For me, it kind of makes me mad that I can't play. Like I didn't come up with those licks. Like they're not mine. Because I'm like, damn, that's just a lot of fun. So the two guitarists obviously have Tom Verlaine and then Richard Lloyd's the other one, and their dual playing is really cool. I think that's a big part of this album is you didn't necessarily have two lead guitars in that way. You usually had like that's the rhythm guitarist and this then the lead guitar is right here. Um, Whereas this kind of flips on its heads. Like what if we sort of had these two main melody lines kind of almost calling and responding to each other, but then they're also playing on top of each other in a way that works. So it's a lot of fun to kind of dig into that. I feel like there's always a new little lick that I hear every time. But all that being said, I also want to talk about how great the drumming is. I really enjoy the drumming on this record. Uh, Billy, I think his last name is Fika, something like that. I don't really know how to pronounce it. But he plays a lot of stuff that reminds me of like Jeremiah Green on those early Modest Mouse albums, um, which I think it just shows how widespread this album's influence was. So I noticed the drumming a lot on my most recent listen. I was just like, damn, this guy's really going off.
I also really like the drumming when it. I think, and this comes back to like they broke up. They put out another record like the next year and basically immediately broke up, and that was kind of it. They had like a comeback
Yeah.
record in '94. Um, if I were the drummer, I'd be mad as hell because like the mixing doesn't emphasize it, and like
Yeah.
when he gets a chance to play, I think it sounds phenomenal. But like a lot of times, it's kind of like ah, just hold the beat back there. Like I
Hmm.
think in Marquee Moon in particular is where they, because it's so fucking long, they're like, oh, we'll give Billy something to do on this 30-second interval. you know um
Yeah.
and I
You doing
think
okay back there, Billy?
like I said, I thought the rhythm section was really good, like when, and it might just be the sound systems I'm listening to it on. Like I'm curious if you listen to something like that was more tuned to how stereo systems were in the late '70s, this might
Yeah,
sound a
I
lot
feel that
better,
same way. Yeah, especially now, like listening to it in our modern age where every version that you're probably listening to with some sort of remaster, it'd be cool to find someone who has like the original pressing and you can listen to it on a sound system from the 70s. That'd be pretty cool. Um, I think it's also interesting that this didn't have a all that big of a following in the United States. It was a much bigger hit in the UK, which
Yeah.
it's like it's interesting. It's not very surprising, but it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
I think that in the same way like 70s hard rock, like proto hair metal band, like hard 70s hard rock and hair metal bands, they might have had one hit in America, but they always are big in Japan. Like I feel
Yeah,
like new wave college rock bands are the same way, where it's like they might not have had the biggest splash in America, but they were big as fucking England. You know,
yeah,
you can really hear the
yeah,
Smiths, like you can
absolutely.
really hear Johnny Marr in this for sure. Now that
Oh
you bring
yeah,
that up,
yeah, especially because so much of Johnny Marr's stuff is definitely coming from a jazz space. I mean, some of the chords that man's playing, I'm like, what the fuck is that? How'd you like? Did you just make up a new chord?
I mean, who's to say? Like what is a chord? You know,
Yeah, some people say it's like, two or more notes played together, but I'm not sure I'm buying that. Not sure I'm buying that.
I think it's about
Not sure.
vibes.
Yeah, definitely is about vibes. I also had a note here. I'm not sure like how much we'll get out of it, but as I alluded to earlier, you're listening to this on the back of listening to Sonic Youth, another band from New York whose music really captures its scene. So just curious, were there any comparisons in your head? Any like any things coming from that space? It's totally fine if not. It was just kind of something that came to me a little later because it wasn't really something I picked up on. So I was like, oh wait, another New York band.
This is an interesting question to me because you also think of what was also like, you know, New York is also the center of disco in 1977.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
this band, way more than Sonic Youth, I could see it almost being party, like at least some of it. Like it has more of that party vibe, I think. And then by the time you get
Yeah.
to like once sort of that brand, like once you get super mainstream stuff like disco, and then like I don't know how to say this, but like the stuff that this is it doesn't feel like this is as much in direct response to mainstream music in the
I
same way
agree with that.
Sonic Youth was. Um,
Yeah.
and I think like I was just gonna say, I think that some of my complaints about overindulgence, like I'm sure seeing this shit live is a very different experience. Like I'm sure you want them to fucking
Yeah.
just riff,
Yeah. You're
you
coked
know?
out.
God, that hasn't changed. You go well. Sorry, now everyone's on ketamine in Brooklyn, which I don't
Well, I mean,
understand.
when we were at that bar in Brooklyn, you were like, "Yeah, people are doing coke in the bathroom." That's just how it is.
Okay, I don't know why that bar. I'm trying to piss. There's one bathroom in this whole fucking bar. It gets packed to the gills, and there's groups of like four girls going to the bathroom at the same time, and it's like there's three pinball machines here. You know, like why here? You know, there's like
Why here?
clubs. There's like clubs like 2 blocks away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now everyone just does ketamine, which is weird because it's like, why are you K-holing and drooling on yourself on my friend's bed at this 20-person house party? You know?
Yeah.
But no, I
I
mean,
don't know. I
like,
feel like
I think what.
well, just because we're on the subject of like the drugs and the music, I think television, at least Tom Verlaine was like pretty clean. Like I think they did drugs early years, but then they were like, nah, we're not doing drugs. And I can't help but think like maybe there was just so many drugs around them that they're like, nah. we gotta
Yeah,
avoid
oh,
this a little bit.
fucking
We're gonna
late
we're gonna end up
70s
we're
New
gonna end up
York.
dead.
I mean, late 70s New York. Like, it's hard to think of a, a place where the drugs were more free flowing besides early 80s New York. You know?
Damn.
Like in the same way like LSD was like, you know, something that was super important to like
The
late
60s.
60s American
Yeah.
rock, and the way ecstasy was super important to like 90s British music. Like
Yeah.
cocaine really changed the whole game. Like the reason they were like, nah, we got to have the bass and drums in the forefront was because everyone was just like was just on the verge of going full like Boogie Nights drug overdose in
Yeah.
at Studio 54. I guess in the last like Sonic Youth, Marquee Moon, I guess what's interesting about New York bands when New York really mattered for rock music as an artistic scene, like I think that the last grasp of that is those like the Strokes, the Yeah Yeah Yeahs,
Yeah, that
those
early 2000s.
the for lack of a better term, the Meet Me in the Bathroom bands, who I'm frankly not very
Yeah,
familiar with.
yeah, that's a really good book, and I think they're making a documentary about it. So,
I think it's out actually.
oh, I'm gonna have to,
I could be
watch it.
wrong, but there was such an emphasis on trying to push the envelope. I think because
Hmm.
back when New York was affordable and you could just like there's always stories people of this time where it's like yeah I was like a part-time waiter and I could pay my rent and I spent all the rest of my time like working on music and art where now that's just impossible. Like if you're doing that your parents are just paying your way or the trust fund is.
Yeah.
When there's that many fucking people you really have to stand out. Like you can't just
Hmm.
like like think of how many places at this time where I'm sure there was like the tightest bar band you've ever heard. You know what I mean? Like just dudes who are
Hmm.
absolutely great. Like that's not going to get you on stage in New York. And I think that both
Right.
with this band and Sonic Youth are doing was like let's like push it. You know what I mean? Like we're not going to stand out by, being virtuosos. We're going to stand out by doing X, Y, and Z. We're going to stand out by being different. And I do think
Yeah.
that as New York has become, I mean, I say as I live here, an increasing playground for the rich and a particularly, unbearable brand of artsiness. I think that's
Hmm.
kind of lost to some extent.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you just said there is very fitting in the sense of this era of music in New York. Obviously, television are a big player, but as I said earlier, it's talking heads that I really focus on because I think they did kind of what television were doing, but incorporated that artsy side very well. I mean, if you listen to Talking Heads 77, that feels more like a punk record than I would say Marquee Moon does. And then just after that, like more songs about buildings and food, they were doing kind of incorporating a lot of these futuristic sounds. And I think a bit more breaking stuff. Even Blondie, I think, are doing some more daring stuff in terms of the sounds and the way to stand out. But I think with television, it's that they did sound so good, and I think it sort of reminded people of like the Rolling Stones or something, right? It just captured that
Right.
spirit of like, oh man, remember when guitar rock music was like really cool and like fun to listen to. Um, as much as it slapped, it's not quite like that CBS NBA '70s theme that you
That shit
sent me.
ripped.
It's not quite as good as that, but it's like, you had to listen to that. For people that don't know, pause the podcast, go on YouTube and search like CBS '70s NBA theme, and it's a fun song, but it also sounds like so much like '70s music, right? It's like the perfect. If aliens came to Earth and was like, "We want to know about music from 1970," I'd be like, "Hey, listen to this." Like
Yeah.
this is what all it sounded like. So this coming at the tail end, and they were doing shows beforehand. It's like, oh wow, that does sound kind of different. And to kind of bring it full circle. That's sort of why for me, I said it's timeless because a lot of those early aughts New York bands I love. Like I loved the Strokes, especially in high school. Like I was listening to Is This It a lot. The beginning of Marquee Moon. I mean, just listen to the first Interpol record. That like
Yeah.
like that's all over that record. And maybe it's this sense of how music eras always look to maybe two or three previous music eras, right? Where it's like early 2000s or they're thinking of the music they were growing up on of like this 80s stuff, even late 70s, and then when we had like the psych rock explosion of like the 2010s, again they're looking at sort of the 70s. Everyone's going back to this other era, 70s, 60s. Um and I think that's why it is kind of timeless. I think if you change the mixing, brought up the bass and the drums a bit more that low end, it would sound like an album from 2002 in New York.
I well also the singing. Not to talk ill of the dead, but it was a struggle for me sometimes. The vocal
Yeah, the
delivery.
vocals, it's definitely like it's he's no Julian Casablancas, right?
He's no
Felt like
David
he's
Byrne
like
either, who also was
uh,
not. You wouldn't
I
put
mean,
David Byrne in the pantheon of like all-time great like vocals as technically like he's not
I don't know about you.
the most.
No, I definitely agree, right? Like the first time I heard Talking Heads, I was like, oh, but like his voice just it grows on you. Like it's so
Right.
so different. I mean, all right, we're just gonna start. This is Talking Heads portion of the podcast. I mean, I could go on about them for hours because
You always have to
fucking
give me a
Talking Heads.
talking.
Come
You
on.
always have to give me. Well, we'll have to do a special Talking Heads episode. We'll have to do Remain in Light
Yeah.
at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I did think about giving you Fear of Music because that was the first Talking Heads album I listened to. Because like Remain in Light, I mean, what the fuck can we say that like hasn't been said already? Wow, isn't this shit awesome?
You may find
We could just do that.
yourself talking about
You may find
Remain in Light.
yourself in a tiny Brooklyn apartment. You may find yourself recording a podcast.
God damn it. God
You
fuck.
predicted
All
it.
right. All right. On that note, do you have any final thoughts, Tyler? After fucking ending my whole career.
Damn, I mean, you could shoot back at me. David Byrne's got plenty of lyrics about the suburban life, so it's fine. As far as final thoughts, I don't think I got anything. I'm glad you listened to this one just because it's something you can cross off that list. It's like watching Citizen Kane, like hey, listen to it. And I feel like now we have a good point of reference for other albums I'll give you in the future because like Is This It was going to be an album later on down the line.
Yeah.
And you can't really talk about the Strokes without talking about Television in some regard, but no, I don't have any final thoughts unless if you have anything else to add.
No, I mean, I don't want to say we talked in circles, but I think we really hammered home the key points. I don't want you to come away thinking I didn't dislike it. Am I going to return to it? I'll probably return to See No Evil a decent amount. But as far as the whole record, like, I was going to say, I'm kind of mad you beat me to Dad Rock, given how much of Dad Rock I listen to. But this is not my particular brand of Dad Rock. So
Yeah, I kind of agree. It's not necessarily mine either.
Shout out to the dads.
Shout out to the dads. This one's for you.
Speaking of dads, Tyler, have you heard the news about the most famous father who likes to kiss his 13-year-old son on the lips?
Oh, what did Joe Biden do this time?
No, that's the granddaughter. No, Tom Brady.
My mistake.
Oh, whoa. Hey,
hey, we're getting a little political.
We're sponsored by Let's Go Brandon Coin on this podcast.
It's also owned by us, and the money goes directly to us. So, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of important sports news sports news.
Oh, there.
I wish. I wish.
Hey.
Freudian
Damn.
slip. And I would like to see these men's cocks, but there's a lot of news about this. I guess Tom Brady technically posted his dick print. Speaking of divorced men who hold our attention, the two elder statesmen of NFL football, one recently retired, Tom Brady, and one about to be traded, Aaron Rodgers, have really been showing the two sides of the midlife crisis coin.
It's been beautiful.
So I think we should start with Tom Brady, just because I think it's a little simpler. It's a little more direct. So Tom Brady recently
Well,
retired.
yeah, yeah. Are you gonna introduce it? Because I remember I shared the original story, and
If
there
you
have
would,
been
if
some
you
updates. There have been some updates.
if you would like to share, please go ahead.
So originally a report came out. I don't see like the original published
TMZ,
date. I think it
I
was,
believe it was.
yeah, I think it was like February, like the very last day of February. Tom Brady reportedly considering career in stand-up comedy, and this is what the article from CBS News says. Today in the land of bad ideas, Tom Brady is considering a new career in comedy. Um, according to the report, Brady's quote unquote ego inflated when he performed well in 80 for Brady, which, quote, left him feeling like an all pro comic. So,
I mean,
he was
speaking
thinking
of
about,
Oscar snubs, we'll see next
well,
year.
next year,
Yeah.
But there has been, and I do want to emphasize that the CBS article states important update. It's in all caps and bolded. TM- whoa, 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 whoa. TMZ reports that Brady is not pursuing a career in stand-up comedy. That report, per TMZ, was, quote, bogus. Instead, Brady might be the subject of a Netflix roast, where funny people will get to make some jokes at his expense. That I can definitely see happening.
I mean, the roast. I mean, we're the same age, so we grew up on Comedy Central roasts.
Yeah.
And it's
The
hard
roast
to
of
think
Pamela
of
Anderson.
who else? Rob Lowe, I think, was one.
Probably.
Charlie Sheen was definitely one. Justin Bieber, I think, was the last one.
Probably.
They're
Yeah,
really stretching. It's hard to think of any comedy that's aged worse than some of the jokes in
Oh God.
those Comedy Central roasts. You know what I mean?
I don't think
Like,
we can repeat any.
I don't remember them well enough to repeat them. But it'll be interesting to see like how woke roasts are gonna go.
Oh.
Because like
that's
you
true.
know. So I also want to say, speaking of Comedy Central roast, do you remember Jeff Ross, who was always on those things? You probably
I feel
don't.
like
'Cause-
I feel like hearing that name activated like MK Ultra, and it's like, wow. I don't even know the last time I heard that name.
Yeah. Anyway, Jeff Ross, who was a very mediocre stand-up comedian who was always on this Comedy Central roast, he was always standing on the corner of like the main NYU campus building as classes got out. And I was like, this man is dating an 18-year-old. That's all I could think about the whole time.
Oh yeah, either that or like selling drugs to him, but probably dating.
Yeah, probably. Even though he's not British, he's British at heart. I assume. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers, I think is
Ooh.
there's a bit more meat here. Anti-vaxxer,
Yeah.
a real woo-woo guy. He's done a lot of weird shit over the past couple of years, claiming he's seen UFOs. Being like I said, anti-vaxxer, COVID denialist. He's also done a lot of weird things to kind of like center his life. He did a 3-day ghee fast, as in clarified butter fast, where he only ate ghee for 3 days, like last year, for some reason. I don't fucking know. But anyway, there was a lot of questions this year about whether he was going to retire. And he's a bit of a media slut. He goes on this one podcast like every other week and just shoots his shit. It's how he got some of his best quotes about his weird conspiracy brain.
Nice.
So the way he tried to decide if he was going to retire or not was he was going to do a 4-day darkness retreat.
Yeah, and I think we've covered this before, and so I'm glad we're getting some updates.
Yeah, so he went to this facility in Portland, and I'm just gonna read. Okay, I just want to say first of all, no, I'll just read it gets across. The room in which Rogers spent his time is partially underground, hobbit-like structure with 300 square feet of space, devoid of light, with a queen bed, a bathroom, and a meditation-like mat on the floor. It is fully powered, so at any point the lights can be turned on from inside the room. I just want to say, it's not a darkness retreat if you can turn on the fucking lights.
Yeah.
It's kind of a
he
cop out.
chickened out. It
It's
really
kind of
is.
fake as hell. But yeah, so he went in this room for 4 days, and as of today, he is going to be traded to the New York Jets. So I can't wait for him to hang out with our psycho mayor, who shares many of his beliefs.
And today, for the listeners, is March 15th, 2023.
The Ides
So you
of
can
March.
date it. The Ides of March.
Yeah.
You know, when we first talked about this, I proposed the question: between Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, who do you think is going to become the Joker the quickest? And
It's
for
tough.
me, I say Aaron Rodgers. And here's why. You know, Tom Brady was trying comedy, and as we all know, the Joker is the clown prince of crime, right? And a wise man once said, "Comedy is okay, but clown is more difficult." So,
Can we like do an episode where we just talk about that clip for an hour? Can we review the Hillary Chelsea Clinton show where they interviewed the 102-year-old French clown?
live pod. So that's why I think Aaron Rodgers has this in the bag. He's already kind of insane. Tom Brady, you know, he might be like Robert De Niro's character in Joker interviewing Aaron Rodgers. So you know, not sure it's going to work out well for him. But Aaron Rodgers, I don't think he's too far from dancing down those stairs. So that's who I'm putting my money on.
So here's the interesting thing. So both Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers are both from like Central California Bay Area. And I think they really represent the two types of white men that like Gen X millennial white men who come from there. Tom Brady's gotten really into like weird nutrition diets. He's divorced, but he's kind of a normal guy. You know what I mean? Like, he probably just want to do stand-up because, you know, it's a chance to get some laughs. You know, he got recently divorced and he's posting pics of him in his underwear. He's going to be a broadcaster, but I don't know. He just seems like kind of boring, like normal, like rich white dude. Aaron Rodgers is like, his family doesn't talk to him. He's doing ayahuasca retreats, butter fasts, darkness retreats, talking about like New World Order shit. I think if the Joker took place in 2023, they would be like a QAnon guy, you know? And I think that Aaron Rodgers is like, he's basically there. Like the only more Q-pilled athlete than him is Kyrie Irving.
That's true.
So I'm putting my money on big Ron, personally.
Yeah, I think he's got it. He's winning the Super Bowl that no one really wants to win.
He's probably hitting that Super Bowl full of DMT, am I right?
Oh, damn.
Oh!
You know, speaking of hitting things
Of drugs. Speaking of drugs.
Speaking of drugs, you gave me an album that talks about drugs a lot.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting the way you introduced television, because this is almost the opposite record for me in that this is a personal classic. I listened to it since the day it's come out. It came out in December 2013, so almost 10 years old. And it's really left no imprint on the culture whatsoever. None of the people involved, for the most part, have really gone on to do... Well, I'll hold that back. The people who made this record have really gone on to do nothing in terms of like impact in a larger way. It doesn't have a Wikipedia page. None of the artists have a Wikipedia page. And yet, I think it perfectly, much like Marquee Moon, is extremely of its time and emblematic of, you know, some of the interesting ideas that were percolating in the tri-state area in 2013. The record is Polo Sporting Goods by RetcH, formerly known as RetcH and Thelonious Martin. RetcH is a rapper from Newark, New Jersey, which is, I mean, it's basically New York, you know. New Jersey isn't a real state. It should be absorbed into Pennsylvania and New York. Thelonious Martin has even a smaller like imprint than RetcH. I don't even. It's hard to even find production credits for him after this. He was a member of Vic Mensa's Save Money crew, and Vic is from Chicago, so I assume that Thelonious is from Chicago. Vic Mensa is probably best remembered as being like Chance the Rapper's like original collaborator, and that really says everything about how obscure Thelonious is. I love this record. I could talk all day about it. Tyler, what'd you think of Polo Sporting Goods? And do you have any Polo on right now?
I'm decked out in polo. I got a polo plug shoved right up, you know where. Um, just a
God
little,
damn.
just a little thing I got for the occasion. Um, I want to say I think it's cool that we both kind of picked like New York records. Because I have an interesting question kind of related to all that. But overall I enjoyed it. For me, it was the production that kept me coming back. I thought the samples were really cool. Like, what was it? Burgundy Windbreaker. It kind of reminded me
Hmm.
of like Rat-a-tat. Like it wasn't. A lot of the samples didn't feel like they were off of music that already came out. Some of it sounded like it was made fresh, which like it could have been. I didn't really do a lot of research because like when I did, I there's not like a whole lot out there. Not a whole like a lot of articles and
There's
stuff of
basically,
like
I was going to bring this up. I'll bring this up later, but there's one interview I remember reading, and I can't find it online anymore, and that's like it. So
yeah. Like because I was just curious to like learn more about the album, but couldn't really find anything. So yeah, I liked the sample on Burgundy Windbreaker. I like the keyboard organ sounds on Short Sermons. Paul Allen's Business Card also has like this really cool drum intro. And listening to this, there was also some moments that sort of reminded me of some of the things that you've released. Like I can kind of see the connection between like the influences. Um, the flows are really good and entertaining. I will say that lyrically, this album is treading a lot of the same ground. I'm pretty sure that like 8 out of the 10 songs on this album reference fellatio in one way or another. Like,
wow.
so maybe by like my third listen over the course of like a week and a half, is just like okay, like I get it, but maybe that's kind of the point. Not every album has to like have some deeper lyrical themes here. Um, that was just I think maybe by like the last listen, and because I was diving more into the lyrics, because when you were like pick out your favorite bars, I listened to it today, and I was like hyper focusing on the lyrics, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, it's a lot of blowjob references. I mean, it's impressive how many ways you can like state given head in that way. um, but my favorite tracks, these were my standouts: Graceful Jewelry Removal, Burgundy Windbreaker, Short Sermons, Paul Allen's Business Card, and you said this album has the saddest song you've ever heard, and I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be Special Jim,
Oh,
which I could talk about Special Jim later on, unless you had
we will
another
talk. We
song.
will talk extensively about Special Jim. I think
Okay.
because no, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna go into like my favorite bars then, but
Well, I was just gonna say just quickly on Special Jim. We'll get back to it, but I don't think this album works without Special Jim.
yeah,
Personally, as far as of repetitious lyrics and themes, I do think that despite only being 10 tracks in 33 minutes, like you could almost argue you could cut 2 of these songs.
hmm
However, it's a real genre record, I think. Like the reason that this music is not made as much anymore and has become a lot like this is firmly in the mold of like 90s street rap. Like RetcH's
yeah,
first appearance as a rapper was on the sequel to Blue Chips 2. I don't know if he was like an Action Bronson affiliate, but there is an Action Bronson guest verse on here.
yeah, and I got some stuff to mention on that too later on.
I think that I don't mind how repetitive it is because it's not about the themes, it's about
Right.
how you say it in the wordplay. And
hmm
I
I
think
agree with
that
that.
I think that RetcH, we'll talk more of this, I think, at tail end, like, kind of like, where are they now for these guys who aren't really in the public eye at all? Well, only RetcH. I don't know what the fuck happened to Thelonious Martin. It just has some of my favorite verses of all time on here. Like the second verse on Burgundy Windbreaker, when we talk about favorite bars, I'm not going to read the whole 12 bars I pulled out, but like it might have my favorite 12 bar run of any verse of any song ever made. But I do think if we're going to talk about sort of the themes in that one interview you can't find anywhere, RetcH describes this album as a lifestyle rap. And it exists in like the mold of a lot of like mafioso records of the 90s, but there's a level of like
that's kind of what it sort of gave me that vibe.
But it's a lot grittier and a lot grosser.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it talks about fellatio, but like how many rappers boast out fellatio are like and she looks good, her mouth don't got no open sores. It's just like kind of like, oh, it's like it's skeezy, and I think the beats add a lot to it. Like, as you mentioned, I do think this is pretty much all sample based, given that I recognize at least one of the samples as like a pretty iconic one, which was one of my pet peeves at the time. But I think he has such a way with words, RetcH, and his flow is wonderful and slippery, and like it feels skeevy. Like he has this persona where like he sounds like disgusted. He has to tell you how hard he's balling. Like he's spitting every word on the ground where he's like I can't believe you even have to ask like how I'm living,
Yeah, like you definitely get that vibe on Marmalade Sky, where it's just kind of like, yeah, and then I like did a backflip onto the yacht, like, I'm just,
I mean,
such a badass. It's just, oh man,
but
it's
also
hard.
like speaking of Marmalade Sky, like I don't know, like that's the most Action Bronson ass song on this record.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess because you bring it up, and I have two notes on this, so we can tie it. So like there are definitely similarities between RetcH and Action Bronson. So I think it's very fitting that Action Bronson is on a track. In fact, when I was doing some research, someone posted on Reddit and was like, "Do you think Action Bronson ghost wrote some of these songs?" And everyone's like, "No."
No.
Like I definitely think there's an influence, but like there's a distinct difference between being influenced and then like, oh yeah, it's like if Action Bronson wrote this, you could tell. And I think like a very clear way that there's an Action Bronson line, and this was one of my favorites. I swear to God, I look Egyptian in the Jeep. Like that's
with a
that's
4-year
from,
conviction in the seat.
Yeah, like
courtside Nets versus the Heat. Like, dude, that's one of my
like,
favorite Action Bronson verses of all time. But anyway,
that's an Action Bronson line. Like if RetcH was rapping that, I'd be like, hold on, I don't think you wrote that. So this album also felt similar to Blue Chips, in that a lot of these songs sound like RetcH making up these stories to his friends, sort of like talking himself up. I mean, definitely Marmalade Sky. It's like this fucking action movie, right? Like some James Bond nonsense. And Special Jim is almost like too sad, to a point where like he just kept adding on to this super sad story over time. And I think even the part where he's just like something, he was like his dad got on the Patrick Ewing jersey.
His favorite player, Patrick Ewing, he had the jersey that his dad gave him before he died in a fiery death. He never wear it because it'd make him depressed. Damn.
And he just goes, damn, like how else can I make this sadder? And everyone's like, that's bullshit. That didn't happen. Like, even the way it opens, like VIP at the Special Olympics, eating the shrimp dish.
Oh, come
yelling,
on!
Like, come on, champ, you can do this. Is what we trained for. Like that didn't happen. But like you get sucked into it. So that it gave me that like that Blue Chips vibe, because we talked a lot about that too, where like Blue Chips was you going on this tour with Action Bronson of like his city and the streets he's always walking. Whereas with RetcH, it kind of feels more like a hangout and sort of just these stories you're reciting. Like he's the kind of guy that you're like, oh, like how was your weekend? And this man just starts like telling you some wild ass shit that you know didn't happen, but you're like, damn man, sounds like you had a great time.
Um,
So
on that note, what I want to say is I don't believe Action Bronson ghostwrote any of this because like, RetcH
yeah,
has
neither do
kept
I.
making music since then, and is a very impressive rapper to this day, even if the music isn't always my favorite. So I have no doubt this is him. He's also like 19 or 18 when he made this, and when Action Bronson makes Blue Chips, he's in his mid to late 20s already. And if you think of it in that sense, like RetcH's big break is on an Action Bronson record. Um, some of the features like Absol and Action Bronson, I have to imagine, did not come from him. Like the other two features are people I think he knows personally, or like dudes from Newark.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and you have to imagine he was someone plugged into that network. And like I said, the rest of his music does not have that vibe at all. Like it gets way more into traditional street rap. Um, and to some extent, the rest of his music has always been kind of trend chasing to some extent. Um, like his follow up record to this is you're gonna love this. It's called Lean and Neck. Um, so it's about lean and getting your dick sucked. He spent a lot of time
Wow.
making kind of um, yeah. He's made some drill stuff more recent, like some New York drill stuff more recently. He did a lot of
Yeah.
sort of like traditional trap inspired stuff in the mid to late 2010s. Everything you're saying is true, and I do think that if someone's gonna come at this from a weak point of like he's not really saying anything, but it's not about him saying anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Right.
and just like it's about how
It's pure
I
style.
it's pure swag. It's pure like I was saying like he is tapping into the same thing I think Jay-Z kind of perfected of like the too cool to care New York flex
Yeah.
rapper, and like just like some of the shit he says, like kidnap the first place winner for a dog show out in Boston. Um Getting high without the brake lights, great whites, sharks, slinging great white, coke, fucking great white bitches. Um, I find dine with Mai Tais and Bonchon. The dipping sauce is Polynesian, lemon season. And the summer breezes is polo chinos without the creases, uncharted beaches, exotic features on foreign pieces. I beat the body, the verdict, red insanity, and then I showed up to your fucking pool party on a manatee. Like, I don't know, man. Like,
Yeah. Some of my favorite bars, these are just like one lines. From Graceful Jewelry Removal. Prince sing a song, I have my fingers snapping. When doves cry, shit happens. Um, Marmalade Sky, the tides is rough. Diamond on the pinky is plush. Because I just picture this man like jumping from this helicopter, diving into the ocean in like a tuxedo, swimming through these rough waters. But that pinky still be looking fine with the
a
ring
polo
on there.
tuxedo.
Pretty much the whole hook from Marmalade Sky goes insanely
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
Burgundy Windbreaker, you have I stuck my face over an equestrian plate. It's only 10 I ever made in the States. I got a set of 8.
That no that I just want to say that part is like my favorite. Like I said, the favorite part of any verse ever. I just want to read the next couple. Spit the pie on the floor and tell the cleaning lady get the mop and drop some more like you missed a spot. She knows she need me, so she keep quiet. Sleep in the basement and she keep crying. Hear it at night through the four vent. She's old and white. That's revenge for my four men. Indentured servant. Make it sound good. Like, like,
Gosh.
whew, whew.
There's another one from Burgundy Windbreaker. I mix the white with the brown goods. Up in the bay, it's called Belushi.
And the thing is, those are the next two bars after what we just read. Like
Yeah.
that verse is an all time classic. Like the
Yeah,
fact,
it,
like
it, it, it definitely goes insane.
I think what I like most, my favorite rap verses of all time are defined by like evocative but like simple imagery you never would have thought of.
Yeah.
Like my favorite verse of all time might be Rick Ross on "Devil in a New Dress," which is the like zenith of that. But the whole idea of like I shoved my face over this like I have this fancy horse themed plate. There's only 10 ever made, and I got 8 of them. Like why don't you have all 10? Like it's such like a
And it's this sense of like when you think of people showcasing and flaunting their wealth, it's not horse plates. It's the kind of thing like, and I'm definitely as you give me more of these hip hop records, I can definitely see the kind of lyrical styles you really enjoy, where I can like this is the kind of guy who would write a line about like to showcase his wealth. He's like, I got the rarest trolls doll. It's up there. Like, that's something he would rap, and there's like that's stupid as hell. But like, I also gotta admit that is pretty hard. Like, if you walked into someone's house and they were like, "This is the world's most expensive trolls doll," you'd be like, "Damn," you would. You're not gonna be like, okay. He'd be like, fuck, how'd you get that?
I just also want to say, sorry, just to bring it back on that.
Yeah.
There's a weird obsession with old money on this record. Like, there's a line, I think, on Odd Sweaters where he's like, there's a set of antlers above the door of the mansion or something like that. And,
Yeah.
And I think the equestrian plates, and I think that's also an interesting spice to it.
I think it, on that note, it's kind of playing with the ideas of like white wealth, like I picture like some Morven Park-esque shit, like, we got our fancy silverware and with the deer's head on the wall, but when you
And then
combine that with like
there.
Yeah, like this
in,
man
in
just
all
polo, like
an all polo outfit,
yeah.
and in his words, hold the blunt like it gave a man powers, like I just want to say on that note, RetcH's most famous. Have you heard the song "Lemonade" by Rihanna and Nerd?
Yes.
You probably,
yeah.
So there's a sample on that where someone's going, "We're mad ethnic right now," and that's from a RetcH Vine, and it's him walking around this like Florida resort, just full of like the oldest, crustiest white people you've ever seen, and he's just like smoking a massive blunt. And he's just like, "We mad ethnic right now." Like, shout out to Martin, shout out to Malcolm.
Damn. Wow. I need to try and dig that up because that sounds hilarious.
It'll be very easy to find, like I said, because that's like his. It's sad that he's most remembered for a Vine and not this, but
I do have a rather heavy hitting deep question.
Okay.
This could open up good discussion. So unless you have any final thoughts, but before we pivot to this question,
would you rather talk about Special Jim before or after the question?
Let's talk about Special Jim. Yeah, let's do that.
The album does not work without Special Jim because while there is a sense of darkness looming on a few of these tracks, like I think Graceful Jewelry Removal is the most paranoid. There's a few times when the references to substances enter the territory he'd explore more on Lean and Neck, where it really feels like coping, like sort of a sad usage rather than a ballin' usage. But Special Jim, like you said, it's like maybe I'm too nostalgic for this, but it doesn't make any sense while it's on this record, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, like even the sample is distinctly different.
And, the opening two bars are VIP at the Special Olympics. I had the shrimp dish. And you're like, all right, it's another fucking one of these songs.
Here we go again.
And then it's just like, it's about a disabled kid who, in RetcH's own words, gets no bitches, has a bad haircut. His entire family's addicted to drugs. And then he finally does well in school, and his mom's so sad she didn't pay attention to him, she kills herself. It's very morose. To me, it's a Stone Cold classic. It's one of these rap songs that's really been forgotten the time that shouldn't have been.
Mm-hmm.
And that I bring up this one interview because he's very willing to talk about all this stuff, and they asked him, so like, what was going through your head when you wrote Special Jim? And he's kind of like, next question, I'm not answering that. Like, he just refuses to talk, like, mention it at all. Just kind of like, I'm not discussing that. Which leads me to believe, maybe there's a hint of truth underneath all of this, Maybe Special Jim's the only real moment on the record. And you go straight from Special Jim into the smooth-ass bossa nova sample with Action Bronson. And I don't know, like, the record becomes a bit too repetitious. It becomes a bit too eye-rollingly, like, flexing, Like, it gives it the humanity it needs to where you see RetcH as someone other than, like, the best gangster rap records. There has to be something more than just like selling drugs and balling and having a lot of sex. Like, there has to be something else. and he concentrates basically all of it into this one song, and I find it very interesting. But
Yeah, I mean, it even makes me think of like some of those Wu Tang songs, especially something like, Cream, where it's like, yeah, we have all this money, and shit, but like the life isn't all it's cracked up to be. Um, and with this song, like you said, it definitely adds like this sense of humanity to it all. Even if I do think it is kind of like uh intentionally fictional in the sense of like let me just like kind of keep piling on. it, I think as I was listening, I was like, oh, like how further are we going to slip into just like this darkness and sadness? Um, I do wonder like if that was the album closer, like I wonder how that would fundamentally change the album, right? I think that'd be kind of interesting.
yeah,
Um, but I did really like that track just because like he was kind of going nonstop. And when he's like, "Damn," that's almost like substitutes for him just taking this breath of like, "Look, I gotta get this sad ass story out to you." And it's the fact that like Special Jim finishes fourth, right? Like doesn't even finish, doesn't even win a medal at these Special Olympics, which is like just to pile on, right? And like that's what I'm saying. It's like, and he finished fourth. Damn, saddest day in August. But it's the saddest day in August. It's not the saddest day of the year. You know?
yeah.
How many other Special Gyms he knows?
I mean, I feel like Special Jim Saturday was when his mom died, but no, I mean, I don't know. Like you're right, and I will defend this song irrationally to the ends of the earth. But I think it's special. It's not just because it's
Yeah.
called Special Jim, but I think
No, I liked it. I definitely think it's a standout on the album. Cause like I was trying to figure out like what's gonna be the saddest song, what's gonna be the saddest song, because that's what you said last time. And then when Special Jim came on, and the second I hear VIP at the Special Olympics, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be this one. So I was ready.
the last thing before your final question is just an aside, but all the guest features on this are excellent, which is
Hmm.
something you can rarely say for records of this budget and time period. Um, and so even if RetcH isn't always delivering his best verse every single song, which is impossible, everyone does their thing, and I think it really, you know, all the verses come after Special Jim, which I think is interesting too. Well, that's not true. Absol comes right
Yeah.
before it. But anyway, yeah.
So, as I feel like a lot of the hip hop records you've given me, they're a lot of New York based hip hop. So, I was kind of interested in talking about this album's representation of New York culture. Because I can definitely feel it like metaphorically and almost literally. You talked about like this is a perfect album for when it's cold. And when I first listened to it, it was actually like pretty warm. So it wasn't until these last few weeks where I was like, oh, okay, like I'm feeling it now. I'm kind of interested. When we give each other these albums, I feel like we sort of use them to sort of investigate ourselves. Get to our inner souls. I want to know what's cooking in that body of yours, Danny. So I'm just curious, like, did NYC hip hop culture like influence your decision at all to like move to the city and get more acquainted with it, or like is that just kind of a coincidence? Like, I know that's kind of like a dumb question, right? But like,
No, no.
I mean, for like as long as I've like, I know in like high school when you started listening to like hip hop, I feel like a lot of the hip hop records you've referenced, it's all like, yeah, I was listening to this in high school, listening to this in high school. So it's like, it's living in that city, like it is like an interest in that music, kind of a byproduct of moving there, because I do think there is a connection between how music is representative of its geography and how that can influence our perceptions and ideas of cities and regions. I mean, like people talk about that all the time when analyzing like cultural theory. I mean, anything from like the Beatles in Liverpool to, as we talked about earlier, like television talking heads and CBGB and that particular scene. Um, so I started thinking a lot about that when I got to like my final few listens of this album. And if there's nothing there, there's nothing there. But it was just kind of like, huh? It just had me thinking.
You've unearthed some deep memories that
Uh.
I mean, the answer is yeah, absolutely. My college admittance essay was my Common App essay was about hip hop and its impact on my life. I told my mom one of the reasons I wanted to go to NYU because I wanted to try and perform up there, and she was like, you shouldn't do that. Like, you can't just walk, like you don't belong in those scenes or whatever. It was kind of roughly what she was saying. She's more of like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. I'll go to these clubs in like Brooklyn or something. She was like, are you going to do that? Maybe you shouldn't do that, you know? But yeah, I mean, I think that I wanted something, I felt like Leesburg, and maybe it probably still does, but I wanted to get away from Leesburg into a place with culture. And I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. Like, I wanted to see what this culture I was so interested in and like really made me feel something was all about. And have I achieved that? I think to some extent. Like I said, like I spent my first 45 up until COVID really like rapping in the park in public like every day or every Friday, I mean, at least. And you meet a lot of characters. You know, one time I still have this, a representative from Stretch and Bobito came up to us and was like, gave us all stickers and was like, y'all are like doing your thing. Like you should keep at it. 'Cause like it's working. So I had those moments. I think New York hip hop culture to me was always the most interesting was because in a weird way, that's not right. Like hip hop, New York hip hop, particularly underground hip hop like this, is very much diametrically opposed because all New York hip hop is essentially, when we talk about underground New York hip hop, we're referring to stuff of the 2000s and late 2010s, but we're also referring to stuff of kind of the mid 90s or trying to carry on a legacy of stuff in the mid 90s in the
if you
era
could, like,
of
name drop just for the sake of like reference
like,
for people.
So like New York, when I think of New York underground hip hop, you're carrying on the legacy of particularly like Wu-Tang Clan and Boot Camp Click and Onyx and what we call hardcore hip hop, where and we'll talk about this more next episode. But like, you know, in sort of as New York hip hop in the 80s is entirely, like literally entirely built on sampling James Brown, and it grows very stale very quickly, and then a few things happen, and then Dr. Dre and the Chronic blows everything up, and there's this very pop-friendly sound, like G-Funk, really synth-driven, really melodic, not really built on samples. And then you have Wu-Tang and Onyx and Boot Camp Click, who are doing jazzier, grimier, rawer stuff. That's probably just as gangster as West Coast rap, but it's way more in your face, you know? And then in the late 90s, you have the shiny suit era, you know, most epitomized by Puff Daddy and Maze and Bad Boy after Biggie dies. And we think of New York underground hip hop, it's them trying to carry on that legacy of those early to mid 90s hardcore acts. Often those same people from those acts reappearing. Like at some point I might give you a Sean Price record, who was a member of Boot Camp Click. And it's all in opposition, but the way they do it opposition is they it's kind of like an almost like a thing that's been lost in our culture, which is the total hatred of selling out, this very Gen X notion of like you can't sell out. And so because of that, you know, your beats might not have a melody, or the melody might be like graceful jewelry removal, where it's like one bar and there's this kind of weird, awkward, rhythmic like delay sound on it. Or it might be like Burgundy Windbreaker, where it's just almost dissonant, like really like buzzsaw synth line, you know? And it's about like, let me talk my shit. Like let me, it's like, oh, like you think you're hot because you got a top 40 song. We're like, I'll never have a top 40 song, but I don't care. 'Cause like I can rap better than you, you know? I can say more interesting things than you, you know? I got a set of equestrian plates, only 10 ever made in the States. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like, and I think that always resonated to me as a kid who always had a big chip on his shoulder about not fitting in. And there's this idea of like it took me a long time to warm up to Jay-Z for this reason, because he was sort of the antithesis of that, where he could do all the other shit, but he also had hits and was also cooler and more popular than you. And I think this record kind of embodies that, like, you know, with the exception of the last song where him and Dash are like, you know, there's more problems for you, there's more problems for me. They actually got beef immediately after this record came out and are no longer on speaking terms, which made sense at all. But,
Damn.
you know, step outside in the cold, take a walk, put in a really puffy jacket, and just kind of like get into your bag of like, how am I going to stand out? How am I going to be the hardest? The dope is out. And I think that like that, even if I never necessarily lived up to that ideal, I do think that it absolutely played a role in me moving in the city, but it also definitely like influenced the way I approach a lot of things.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah, I mean, because like listening to it, it definitely would kind of take me back to when we were walking through the city in December and just like the storefronts and how everything is, just how everything is crowded. From like all the people to all the buildings, signs, all the stuff like that. I mean, I think even the album cover, right? Just like all of this polo gear, like it looks like some storefront um in the New York area. So I just thought it was pretty interesting. And again, like the other hip hop picks you've given me, a lot of them have been like New York based, like Action Bronson. So I think it'd be cool if later on down the line we cover something like West Coast, just to see how like that sort of compares. I feel like my own hip hop tastes definitely lean more towards East Coast. Like all of my favorite hip hop acts and rappers I think are mainly like East Coast or like Midwest. Um there's not a ton that are like West Coast, and maybe it's like a little bit easier for me to relate to like the East Coast culture as opposed to West Coast. But yeah, that was pretty much it. I think that was a good answer. You get an A plus. You're in.
I got in. I mean, I got into NYU with that, right? So I guess it
Yeah.
all worked out.
There you go. And that was it. I mean, I don't have any questions that are gonna top that. So yeah, it was a cool listen. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to recommend that's from RetcH, to be honest. Maybe some songs.
Hmm.
But I mean, I don't. This and Blue Chips are the two records of this era that really stand out to me, and I still come back to. But
Hmm.
yeah, very special record to me. Shout out Special Jim. Shout out RetcH. Shout out Thelonious Munden. Shout out Brick City.
Right through the curtains, tuck and roll into the corridor. They caught the vase before it hit the floor and snapped his neck at the drawing board. Gather the prince, plant the bomb, escape through the vent. Parasail off the roof into the whip with the tents, then pulled off like a renegade. Not to mention it was Father's Day. The sky was marmalade. Tossing the chair, drop kick while it's still in the air. Elbow drop to the retina, now he vision impaired. Crime scene at the Bellagio. The cop was pussy, but he stocky though. I faked him out with the stop and go. I broke his ankle, got his sock exposed. He tried to style, look how I got him, no. Spin move, hurdled over a family of five. Ass plop on the railing of the stairs, and I slide, land on a skateboard, no slide on top of the great.
Well, we're getting to the tail end of the episode, but there's one important thing we haven't covered, Danny. Mustaine Madness is back. Dave Mustaine is at it again. He has once again opened up about the relationship between himself and his former bandmates in Metallica. So, ever since Metallica kicked his ass out in '83 and he went on to form the better band Megadeth, um, it's just been a little bittersweet. Some little bit of bad blood. So here's an article from in an interview with Guitar World that Mustaine recently did, but I'm reading this article from Consequence of Sound. He says, "I wanted things to be reconciled and to be friends," Mustaine said, "but for whatever reason, Metallica didn't. And they're represented by the same agent as Megadeth. And I've asked our agent, you're Metallica's agent too. Why won't these guys play with us? What are they afraid of?" He continued, "The fact is simple. The world wants to see Megadeth and Metallica play together. Does Megadeth need Metallica? No. But Metallica talks about their fans, but they don't give them what they've been asking for. What are they afraid of? I don't know. It's not me, it's them." So it sounds like Mustaine's kind of handed them the olive branch. And I gotta admit, I'm in Camp Mustaine here. I feel like the dudes in Metallica were kind of shitty. If I was a 50-something-year-old dad, and if I heard that Metallica and Megadeth are touring together,
Oh, I'm there. I'm there with
I'm
the
there.
dads.
Yeah, I might be there now.
Yeah, I'm
I
personally
s-
there with the dads. I
yeah.
don't know about you, but no, you know what? You know what Metallica's afraid of? They're afraid Mustaine is going to convert them to evangelicalism.
Yeah, and
Which
maybe
is a
that's maybe that's
which is a
valid. That's
valid
valid.
fear. It's a valid fear. I mean, also, would you
Yeah.
want to spend more than an hour with Dave Mustaine over in a year? Nevertheless, hours in a year.
I mean, but the thing is like you would be spending more than an hour with Dave Mustaine, and then also like more than an hour with like Lars Ulrich.
Oh, and you
So
already
it's
have to do
like
that so much.
it's a big fat lose lose.
It's
It's
like Alien
awful,
versus
but
Predator. You know,
yeah, like
whoever else has
which
to
one would
be
you
there.
rather which one would you rather have trying to come and kill you?
Oh,
you know,
Jesus. Anthrax. They seem like nice guys.
I don't know, but I gotta do some Google. I'm sure they said something.
No,
Slayer. They definitely don't use any symbols that are reminiscent of anything bad in history.
well, Slayer's very Catholic, and they think like they're actually very Catholic, which is really funny. I'd rather hang out with them.
I
We could
agree.
bond over that.
That cracks me up every time. But we always got to touch upon our buddy Dave, see how he's doing, how things are going in Dave Mustaine land. But
Never well.
never have they ever been well?
Speaking of never being well, I'm personally very unwell after you just told me maybe it's time for some non-New York hip hop records. Because I had a record on deck for you next episode that is yet another New York hip hop record. But this one is very different than everything we've done before. We've done two sort of this early 2010s underground blog rap. We've done Cool Keith, weird space horny record with a West Coast producer. Let the record show. It was a bit of a bi-coastal affair. Now we're returning to the golden age of hip hop, 1989. Let me just double check that before I sound like an idiot. 1989, De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising. The legendary Trugoy of De La Soul, Plug 2, as he's often known, passed away this February. And I don't know if it was because of that or just happened to be bad timing, but all their stuff just came on streaming March 1st. So I thought...
Yeah, and there's a lot of interesting discussion points about that too.
Yeah. But I saw, between those two things and, I know you love Tribe and De La Soul and Tribe are kind of like, very closely tied in many ways.
They're the Pokemon and Digimon of hip hop, if you will.
That's really disrespectful to De La Soul. It's more of like, I think also De La Soul not being on streaming for such a long time has really caused him to be forgotten.
Well, I mean, I don't know what you're trying to say about Digimon, but
if anything, De La Soul is the Pokemon. If we're talking that timeline, but yeah, I just really wanted to talk about this. I haven't listened to this record in a long time, but I have been listening to it since it got back on streaming. And yeah, I think it'll be a very interesting record. It might be the most influential record we've ever talked about for both reasons that are because of what's on the record and because of what happened surrounding the record. So
cool. Yeah, I think it'll be a good point of conversation because I've heard some songs off of that record. There's one I can tell you it's gonna give me a little bit of PTSD. It's Me, Myself, and I, because working at Converse back in the day, they played that song all the time.
that one's a bit of an outlier in terms of sound. So
Yeah, it might be a little hard for me to get through that one, but I'll do it for you. I'll do it for you. In a similar fashion, similar geography, we're going across the river to one of America's most beloved cities, Hoboken, New Jersey. you know, the
Ooh.
Woo! So there's a little band called Yola Tango, and they've been kicking around for I swear like better part of like 30 years now. Um, they're a three-piece. They're fantastic. Ira Kaplan is one of the most influential guitar players on my style. They came out with a new album this year that is great. So I was trying to decide what album I wanted to give you. And I ended going with the one that a lot of people say is their best album just because I think it represents so much of their sound, but it's called I Can Hear the Heart Beating as One. It touches a lot of ground from shoegaze to slowcore to even like a little bit of post rock, as much as like a three-piece band can do it. I'm seeing them this coming Sunday, the 19th, my second time seeing Yola Tango. So I figured, you know what? Now's the time. The time is now. Let's
Time is now.
let's do it. So I'm excited for you to dive in. A lot of fun guitar work on there. I think there's gonna be a lot of stuff that I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it. And I've been wanting to kind of revisit that record recently too, so it gives me an excuse to go back.
Yeah, Yola Tango is one of those groups that all of my friends who were really into indie and experimental music in high school and college were always really into that I never listened to. So this is exciting. Heard a lot about them. Heard a lot about the new record in particular. But yeah, it's something I've been putting off, much like Radiohead. So this is good.
Yeah, there's something really cool about a band like that that's been making music for so long to put out a new record that is, in a similar one we talk about low, that is still very refreshing in the sense of like, look, it doesn't matter how old you are, you can still keep finding new ways to make art and doing what you're doing. So I've just been on a big Yola Tango kick. Compared to, I've also been on a big Hatsune Miku kick. So look, you could have gone down that path. So you take the red pill or the blue pill. And the blue pill is the same color as Miku's hair. So
Oh God, I'm gonna the day you give me a record from a virtual artist is the day the podcast ends.
what was that guy's name? FN Mecha?
Yeah, yo,
We're going back.
Let's get FM Mecha on to guest host an episode with us.
Look, all I'm saying is that Hatsune Miku Project Diva Mega Mix is a very fun rhythm game. Once you start, you look at the time, and you're like, God damn, I've been playing this for like how long? It just sucks you in. But no, I don't think, at least for the time being, there are any Vocaloid albums in your future. But if you keep up this bad behavior, you little bitch, we'll see.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. The next time I give you a New York hip hop record, that's when it happens. De La Soul will be the last New York hip hop record in the next 15 episodes. We're gonna stamp that right now. Episode 26 is gonna be the next one.
The best part is that we've only covered 2.
Yeah, but that three's a crowd, but 3 is also the magic number. So
that's true. I know that song. It was featured in a Best Picture Oscar snub, Spider-Man, whatever the fuck it was called. Who the fuck knows? Who can remember?
Spider-Man and the Green Goblin Gussie.
The Green Gussie?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Venom the Rat of Carnussie.
Can't wait for that one. God. When Tar 2 drops, that's when the Oscars will really know. They'll know what kind of mistake they made. But until then, do you have any final words for the good people out there, Danny?
No.
All right. Well, you heard it here. We don't have any final words for you. So, see you, I guess.
Goodbye.